Richard, I think the whole idea of a global travel program is kind of silly and missing the mark.
Why is that? You think of the companies that we typically showcase as best practices are global companies. Why would a global travel program not hit the mark?
Well, let me tell you why. There's so much disparity today, in terms of, our division in France being different from our division in Asia, different from our division in the United States. The local suppliers are different. You're never going to find a one-size-fits-all supplier.
Of course.
Because if you do, you're going to end up disappointing that local guy.
So I think I partially agree with you, right? So there's definitely a balance, right, between meeting the local, very real needs, but I also think we need to keep in focus the global reality of business today, right? That you are operating across borders, that you can't isolate something down to a particular country or business unit, that we need to have some consistency. I mean, for a global organization, for an enterprise to be global, there are things that have to be done consistently. And if not, you're leaving a lot of value on the table. So I don't think the global travel program is the problem. I think to think that you could kind of copy paste a program from one market to another certainly is a fallacy that we've allowed to live.
I think that's a good point. I'm going to give you that point. But what many would say is, well, then you're leaving money on the table, because if you pick one guy, he'll give you a better deal. That's the challenge. That's why I come back to say, the people that try these global programs, I don't think it works.
So maybe it's a question of I don't know, categories, right? There are parts of your global travel program that can be very global, and there's parts of your global travel program that has to be much more local, right? You're going to want things when it comes to data and policy and things that transcend borders, right? Really don't have the same borders. You're going to want to find ways to make things global, I think, and you have to.
I agree with you that data and, aggregating all your data is important. But as soon as you introduce a second travel agency, now you've introduced a second data source. That's a level of complexity that often gets overlooked, right? If I've got, one agency doing everything, that's great. If that agency does not have an affiliation in a particular country, okay, now I'm a little bit off the grid. So now how do I get the data back from that other agency, right? To my point earlier, I think it's a challenge.
I didn't say it was easy, and you're right about agencies having pieces that are separated, but we're getting better at being able to connect those pieces in a way that the information, the policy, the activity can be more globalized. I think there's certain foundational elements of a program that you focus on being global, and then there's a lot of the softer factors where you can be local. I think, so data comes from a couple places, so let's start there. It's your TMC who's booking and collecting a lot of the information about when and where your travelers are going.
Okay, but let me stop you. If you got a global program, what's the likelihood of having one TMC?
Today, there's more opportunity to have one global TMC, or at least one organization that takes responsibility, even if they're local providers, than I think there was a few years ago. So it's possible,
okay.
Yes.
All right, so where would you start then? All right, now you're convincing me a little bit, right? So where would you start? What component would you go after first to create a global program? Would it be, because you mentioned the TMC, you mentioned the payment, you mentioned suppliers. Where would you start?
It's policy, and I almost didn't say that because sometimes it feels like, we could write one policy in English and export it. But what I mean is that there's a policy from what are we trying to achieve, and set a set of philosophies and make sure they translate, and then adapt them to each market. I'd start with there. I'd have one approach. What are we trying to do? How do we treat travelers? What are those kind of in the lines, outside the lines things for our company? Because on that you can build TMC, and you can build card, and you can build supplier agreements, and you can build servicing models. But I do think you have to start there in order to be able to implement all those other pieces.
I think we actually agree, my friend, because what I think you just said is what I actually think, which is think globally, but make sure that you have the ability to act locally.
Absolutely.
We got an agreement on that?
We're agreed.